Our own Texas Rose was briefly banished by the tyranny of big tech. But we and all her friends around the world rallied the public in her support, and she was reinstated. And I'm particularly glad to welcome back to the mother of all talk shows, our very own Rachel Blevins. Rachel, it's a joy to see you re-established in the places that sought to banish you, but in truth, you've never gone away. It's always possible to follow your work, and my goodness, it's increasingly important to do so. How are you, and how did you pull it off to get back on YouTube?
Well, thank you, George. I'm happy to be here back on this show, and yes, also back on YouTube. It was interesting. I know YouTube kind of goes through these phases. Will purge multiple different accounts. I was seeing that in recent weeks. We had, Mark Sloboda, DD Geopolitics, Professor Glenn Deason, all of these commentators who specifically talk about Ukraine and also Russia and who don't buy the Western narrative on it. They were having their pages wiped off of YouTube. And I was getting targeted with YouTube taking down 4 videos on my channel, claiming that they all had hate speech in them. Now, obviously, I go and I look at these videos, I'm wondering, okay, if you're saying that there's hate speech, then what does that mean? Is that in any of these videos? I still don't believe that it was. I did think it was notable that all of those videos, though, were also about Ukraine and Russia. So even as we're in this time right now where there is so much going on in the world, I mean, we're keeping an eye on the Middle East, wondering when Israel is going to attack Iran, if that leads to World War III, you still have YouTube over here going after the quote-unquote misinformation and hate speech it claims that it's finding on Ukraine. So my channel was taken down completely on a Sunday, and the first thing I do is I go to X, I post about it, and people like yourself were raising the rallying cry, calling out YouTube all around. And I have never seen such a show of support, so many people reaching out to me saying that they were contacting YouTube. And then by Tuesday afternoon, I get this email from YouTube saying, hey, basically, are bad in a way, although they don't really come out and say that, but they say, we understand that your channel is very important to you and your audience, and we have chosen to reinstate it. However, they did include a warning on it, which, yes, they did still. So I do still have a warning on my channel claiming that they did still find hate speech in those 4 videos that were about Ukraine and Russia. So something to kind of keep an eye on. I'm still being careful with the videos that I post there. But of course, as you were noting, there are plenty of places on the internet to be able to post content. And so every alternative platform, I am there. I'm still posting the same content. I haven't changed anything about what I'm saying or speaking out about, or, what issues I'm covering. It's just we're kind of treading lightly on the YouTube for a little bit until they finally take that warning off my account.
Well, look, if it's any consolation, the day will come, and because you're young, you definitely will see it, when everyone will be claiming that they took your point of view on the NATO-Russia war in Ukraine. If I tell you that when I was the leading force opposing the British and American invasion of Iraq, it was quite a lonely wicket. It was a source of quite some considerable career damage, even physical health damage, damage to one's status and standing. One was treated as bad or mad or both. But within a couple of years, certainly within 5 years, you could not find anybody who would continue to say that the Anglo-American invasion of Iraq had been a good idea. And within 5 years, I would turn up for university debates on the subject when no speaker for the other side could be found. And the same will be true of this Russia, Ukraine, NATO business. And it may come very quickly, Rachel, because if I'm right, and Donald Trump wins the election in just 3 weeks, less than 3 weeks from now, he will stop the Ukraine war. At least he'll stop America's endless and very, very expensive support for the Zelensky regime. He'll pull the plug on the whole operation, and by the time February comes and the inauguration, it might very well be that this war is over. What's your take?
Oh, I may be a bit more cynical than you, and I do appreciate you bringing up the history there. I know that, you have quite the legacy of being on the right side of history and standing up for the people. And it's crazy to think now, you're right, that people were ever back there cheering for the Iraq war, cheering for the killing of over 1 million Iraqis. And yet those people, when you look at all of the war criminals from the US to the UK, they're not behind bars, right? They haven't faced any sort of meaningful accountability. They're still walking free. You've got, George W. Bush, who is now some sort of reformed artist, and he's celebrated by the media. And it's incredibly concerning to me to look at the way that those war criminals are treated, because it shows that for today's versions, right, for Joe Biden and Antony Blinken and Lloyd Austin, that they're looking back and they're going, well, there was never any accountability for them, so why should I have to worry about there being any accountability for me? Now, when it comes to Trump, now I'm with you. I do think that despite these polls saying that things are neck and neck between him and Harris, I think he has a significant edge, and that we are going to see that come election day. As long as everything is free and fair here in this country, I think that you're going to see a significant push for Trump in the votes. Now, my biggest concern about him is the fact that in the same way before his first campaign, there were so many things he actually campaigned on, but then when he gets into office, he surrounded himself with these same swamp creatures that he said that he was going to get rid of. So I do think he's learned some things. I do think that he has some significant people around him, specifically on the issue of Ukraine. You have his running mate, J.D. Vance, even his son, Donald Trump Jr., who have been very outspoken about Ukraine, about Zelensky, and the fact that he is a little dictator who's stealing plenty of U.S. money. And so I think there is some hope there, but my biggest concern is going to be how he decides to handle things if he gets back into office for that second term. And you also have the question of how Russia is going to handle things, because as we know, Vladimir Putin has been very clear with his list of demands, saying this is what is required for us to even hold peace talks. Now, he could make some changes on that, right? If there is a Trump that comes into office that is willing to work with him, there could be some possible back and forth there. But I think my biggest concern is that Russia, well, not necessarily concern, I should say, but the biggest thing to note is that Russia has learned from recent years how the West operates. They've learned from the Minsk agreements, from the Istanbul talks of last year, that the West may say that they want peace. They may say, okay, we're going to sort out things for now, but then they use that time to continue to arm the crazy extremist neo-Nazis in Ukraine. And so Russia's looking at this going, hey, we may get 4 years of Trump, but the concern for them, I'm going to think, would be whether we come to an agreement now, whether Trump is able to continue on everything that he says he wants to do regarding Ukraine. So definitely a lot of moving parts there, but I will say I would be encouraged if Trump does stick to what he's campaigning on when it comes to support for Kiev.
Well, I think he may not stick to what he's doing on everything else, but I'm sure that he will stick to it on Ukraine for a number of reasons. Perhaps the overarching one being he knows that the Democrats are up to their neck in corruption in Ukraine, and he can take out a number of very big Democratic names out of politics forever, whose family members are sucking at the teat of a Ukrainian exchequer itself bloated by the taxpayers' dollars of the United States, Britain, the European Union, and so on. I think he knows that there are very dark secrets for the Democrats in Kiev, Hunter Biden only being a lightweight amongst them. So I think that a new President Trump with a second term will definitely pull the plug on Zelensky. I think he despises Zelensky. I think he thinks that Zelensky has done everything he could to try and damage him. One of Zelensky's supporters may well have been trying to assassinate him on the golf course in Florida. I think if there's one issue that Trump will be faithful on, it is Ukraine. But what about the others? Rachel, I'm sorry to put it this way, but we might not see out the end of the week before Netanyahu unleashes what will become the mother of all wars right across the whole region, from the Levant to the Persian Gulf, and maybe even to the Atlantic. The whole balloon might go up. If these leaks from Washington are correct, then Netanyahu has been given a green light by Washington to do whatever it is he wants to do.
Oh, absolutely. And it is extremely concerning. I was actually looking at those classified documents that were leaked earlier. And the most fascinating part to me is that the U.S. has presented these documents as if saying, hey, we kind of took a look at Israel. This is what it looks like they're poised to do based on all of their military setup. This is where things are pointed when it comes to Iran. And according to reports, you got these documents marked so that they are only supposed to be seen by other Five Eyes Intelligence Alliance members. So this is the U.S. giving their friends kind of a heads up of this is what Israel is going to do when it comes to Iran. And then the biggest part, I would say, from these documents is the acknowledgement that Israel has nuclear weapons. Now, we all know that, right? It's something that we can talk about and it not be referred to as some kind of conspiracy theory. But here in the United States, the U.S. is actively violating its own law by continuing to give Israel billions upon billions of dollars of military aid every single year, knowing that Israel is not party to any nuclear treaties. They don't have any inspections of their sites and of the weapons that they have in their power, and also knowing the fact that when Israel began its genocidal war targeting the Palestinians last year, you had Israeli officials who were openly talking about wanting to use nuclear weapons on Gaza. That's not something that was just kind of whispered about. That was something that was actually suggested as a strategy. And this entire time, the U.S. has refused to do anything. They've continued to play dumb. They know exactly what is at stake. If Israel does choose to attack Iran, Iran then chooses to retaliate once again, because we have to remember that even though the mainstream media is claiming, oh, Israel is just planning its retaliatory attack, the reality is that Iran's last attack, that was legitimate retaliation. Now you have Israel escalating things once again. And the fact that the U.S. refuses to rein them in whatsoever is a reminder that the U.S. is not only enabling this genocidal war that is now expanding into a regional war, but they have been complicit in every single crime. And for every time that the U.S. refuses to speak out, it's a reminder that they approve of everything Israel's doing. And I think that that's something that needs to be in the minds of every individual in the West as they are watching their governments really start World War III, at least in this part of the world.
Rachel Blevins, still in fighting fine form. It's wonderful to see you again. Everyone needs to follow Rachel Blevins on all platforms. Don't take the risk of her being closed down.